I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
The year is 1972. Washington City Police arrest 5 burglars at the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington. All of the burglars have political connections at the highest level. The break-in was exposed by 2 writers at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. They traced payments sent to the burglars all the way to the committee to re-elect the president. This put President Nixon under fire and raised questions.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
This forced Nixon to resign and led to an overall distrust in the government. A little known fact about Watergate is that every movie based on this topic is boring as hell, so shout out to Miss Senna for assigning me this. In class, we watched the movie Frost Nixon, so you should know what happens, but if you're like Dallas and can't think back that far, I'll recap it for you. The movie takes place in 1977, over 3 years after the Watergate scandal that ended Nixon's presidency. At the time, many Americans felt cheated out of justice because Nixon didn't face the consequences due to President Ford's pardon.
Have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
In the movie, television personality David Frost is tasked with getting an apology from Nixon for his actions in the cover-up of Watergate. Frost has a series of interviews with Nixon to try and get this confession. He and his men work to dig up as much dirt as they can on Nixon. Throughout the film, Frost and his researchers struggle to win any of the arguments, but when all hope is lost for Frost, they find game-changing information on Nixon's involvement in the cover-up. At the end of the film, they get Nixon to apologize on his own behalf for his actions in Watergate. The movie I watched about Watergate is All the President's Men. This movie follows Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post on their struggle to gain information and expose the Watergate scandal. In this movie, the 2 journalists talk to as many creep connections as they can to gain information. They gather enough info to publish a story and expose the committee's involvement in the scandal. Their story leads to the arresting of multiple men and the resignation of President Nixon. The biggest difference between the 2 films is Nixon's involvement. In Frost Nixon is one of the most important characters and appears in almost every scene. However, in All the President's Men, creep is the main target throughout the movie and Nixon is only mentioned a couple times. Because of this, All the President's Men has much better character development. They show characters that aren't even mentioned in Frost Nixon, such as Deep Throat, the 2 reporters, along with many people in the committee to re-elect the president. The most common theme between both movies is teamwork. Throughout All the President's Men, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are forced to work together, even though they barely know each other. They have great camaraderie and both contribute to finding information to expose creep. Because of their great teamwork, they both contribute to bringing down creep and Richard Nixon.
Yours is better.
In Frost Nixon, David Frost and his team have to work together and trust each other to take down Nixon in the interviews. The last commonality between the 2 films is perseverance. When the 2 reporters thought they couldn't get any of the creep members to talk, they kept visiting different members over the course of several days. Their perseverance finally paid off when one of the members finally gave them useful information. In Frost Nixon, David Frost looked like he lost the interviews after the first few arguments. He constantly got beat by Nixon and made Nixon look good. Him and his team worked all night before the final interview about Watergate to ensure that Frost got the apology that everyone wanted. At the end of the day, both of these movies were mildly entertaining, and if you want a nice 2-hour nap, I highly recommend you check either one of these out.
Shit.